I never meant to fall in love with sawdust and calloused hands. But there I was, 26 years old, standing in Marcus Chen's woodworking shop at 7 in the morning, pretending I needed a custom bookshelf when what I really needed was a reason to see him again. The first time I walked into his workshop was 3 months ago. I'd passed the storefront a dozen times on my way to the coffee shop, always glancing through the window at the man inside, bent over his workbench with complete focus, wood shavings catching the morning light like snow. The sign above the door read, "Chen Carpentry" in simple letters, and underneath, almost apologetically, "Custom Furniture and Restoration." I'm a high school English teacher. I don't know anything about wood or craftsmanship or the difference between oak and maple, but I know longing when it settles in my chest like a stone, and I'd been carrying that weight for weeks every time I walked past his shop. So I invented a need, a bookshelf. Floor to ceiling, I told him that first day, for my apartment. Something sturdy, something that would last. Marcus looked up from the chair leg he was sanding, and I forgot every other word I'd planned to say. He had these dark eyes that seemed to hold entire conversations, and when he smiled, just slightly, I felt it in my knees. Floor to ceiling, he repeated, standing up and wiping his hands on his canvas apron. You must have a lot of books. I'm a teacher, I said, which was true. English literature I've been collecting for years. Also true. What I didn't mention was that most of my books were already on shelves, crammed into every available space in my one-bedroom apartment. What I didn't say was that I'd been watching him through that window for 2 months, memorizing the way he moved, the careful precision of his hands, the small furrow between his eyebrows when he concentrated. He walked me through the process that day, showed me wood samples, explained grain patterns and joinery techniques I barely understood. His voice was quiet, measured like he was sharing secrets. When his finger traced the grain of a piece of cherry wood, explaining how it would age and darken over time, I couldn't stop staring at his hands. Strong hands, gentle hands, hands that created beautiful things. I'll need to see your space, he said finally. Take measurements. Understand the light, the room flow. Would tomorrow evening work? I nodded, not trusting my voice. He was coming to my apartment. I had 24 hours to make it look like I actually needed a custom bookshelf. That night, I rearranged my entire living room, moved books from shelves to boxes, created empty wall space, rehearsed casual conversation in my bathroom mirror like a teenager preparing for prom. My roommate, Jen, watched this performance with barely concealed amusement. You know, you could just ask him out, she said, leaning against my doorframe. Like a normal person. Coffee, dinner, the usual. He's coming for a work consultation, I said, adjusting a lamp for the 3rd time. It's professional. Right, professional. That's why you've changed shirts 4 times. I threw a pillow at her, but she was right. I was terrified. At 26, I'd had exactly 2 relationships, both ending in the same quiet disappointment. Both with men who treated our relationship like a secret to be managed, a risk to be calculated. I was tired of hiding, tired of being someone's maybe, someone's eventually, someone's if the circumstances are right. But Marcus, there was something about the way he existed in his space, completely comfortable, completely himself. The rainbow flag pin on his apron strap was small but deliberate. He wasn't hiding. And that confidence, that ease, it drew me in like gravity. He arrived the next evening at 6, carrying a leather messenger bag that looked older than both of us. I'd spent the previous hour in a state of controlled panic, cleaning surfaces that were already clean, adjusting books I'd already adjusted. When the doorbell rang, I actually jumped. Hey, he said when I opened the door, and that small smile again, the one that made my heart forget its rhythm. Ready to talk shelves? We spent an hour measuring the wall, discussing height and depth and load-bearing capacity. He moved through my space with this quiet attentiveness, occasionally picking up a book from my remaining shelves, reading the spine, setting it down carefully. When he found my battered copy of Giovanni's Room, he paused, running his thumb over the cover. "This was the first book that made me feel seen," he said quietly. "I was 17. Read it in 3 hours, sitting in my dad's garage. Cried at the ending." "Me too," I said. 19, library copy. Had to return it with tear stains on the last pages. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and something shifted in the air between us. Something that felt like recognition, like finding your language spoken in a foreign country. "I should mention," he said, setting the book down gently, "that I'm probably going to take longer on this project than necessary. I tend to overthink pieces when I actually care about them turning out right." "That's okay," I managed. "I'm patient." "Are you?" he asked, and there was something in his voice, something that made me brave. "No," I admitted. "Not really. Not about things that matter." He smiled then, fully, and I saw the small gap between his front teeth that I'd noticed from the coffee shop window but had never been close enough to appreciate. "Good," he said. "Neither am I." The bookshelf took 6 weeks to build. I visited the workshop twice a week, ostensibly to check progress, actually to watch him work. He'd clear a stool for me near his main workbench, and I'd sit there grading papers while he measured and cut and sanded, the air filling with the smell of fresh wood and the quiet rasp of his tools. We talked during those visits, real conversations that wandered from childhood to philosophy to the small disappointments of daily life. He told me about growing up in his father's furniture shop in San Francisco, learning joinery before he learned algebra, about coming out at 15 and his dad's quiet acceptance, his mom's immediate embrace, about moving to Portland 3 years ago to start his own practice, to build things that mattered on his own terms. I told him about my family, my parents' strained silence when I came out at 22, my younger sister who still called every week but never mentioned my dating life, as if ignoring it would make it less real, the loneliness of standing in front of 30 teenagers every day, teaching them about love and identity through literature, while keeping my own carefully hidden. "Do they know?" Marcus asked one evening, looking up from the dovetail joints he was cutting. "Your students?" "Some suspect," I said. "I don't hide it, but I don't announce it either. It's complicated. Small school, conservative district." He set down his chisel, giving me his full attention. "That sounds exhausting." "It is," I admitted. "Sometimes I feel like I'm living in 2 different versions of myself. The careful one at work, the real one everywhere else. Except the real one doesn't get much practice." "He could," Marcus said quietly, "if he wanted to." My heart was doing that thing again, that arrhythmic dance that made breathing difficult. "Yeah?" "Yeah." He stood up, wiping sawdust from his hands, walking over to where I sat. "I've been trying to figure out how to ask you something for 3 weeks now. Kept chickening out, telling myself it was unprofessional, that I was reading signals wrong, that I should just focus on the bookshelf." "What changed?" I asked, looking up at him. "You did. Just now. Talking about wanting to practice being real." He paused, and I could see the vulnerability in his face, the courage it took to speak. "Would you want to get dinner with me? Not to talk about the bookshelf, not as Carpenter and client, just as us." I stood up, and we were close enough that I could see the small scar above his left eyebrow, the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "I've been inventing reasons to come here," I said. "I don't actually need weekly updates on bookshelf construction." "I know," he said, and he was smiling again. "I've been adding unnecessary steps to the process. This is maybe a 2-week project, tops. I've been stretching it because I wasn't ready for you to stop visiting." So we're both terrible at this, I said. The worst, he agreed. Dinner. Yes, absolutely yes. Our first date was at a small Italian place in his neighborhood, the kind with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles and waiters who'd worked there for decades. We sat in a corner booth and talked for 4 hours, until the staff started stacking chairs and giving us pointed looks. He told me about the furniture pieces he dreamed of making, museum-quality work that told stories through wood and joint and finish. I told him about the novel I'd been writing for 5 years, always in fragments, never quite brave enough to commit to the full story. "What's it about?" he asked, reaching across the table to take my hand. It was the first time we'd touched deliberately, and the contact sent electricity up my arm. "A man learning to build something permanent," I said, after spending years convinced everything he touched would fall apart. Marcus squeezed my hand gently. "I'd like to read it, whenever you're ready." We started spending every evening together, sometimes at his workshop where he taught me basic woodworking and I proved to be catastrophically bad at it. Sometimes at my apartment where we'd cook dinner and I'd read him passages from books while he sketched furniture designs. Sometimes just walking through the city, holding hands, being visible, being real. It terrified me, that visibility. The first time he kissed me in public, outside a movie theater on a Friday night, I tensed instinctively, scanning for reactions, for threats. But Marcus just held my face gently and said, "You're safe. I've got you. We're allowed to exist." The bookshelf was finished after 6 weeks, just as he'd predicted it would take if he actually worked at a normal pace. He delivered it on a Saturday morning, along with his friend David, who had a truck. It was beautiful, floor-to-ceiling cherry wood with adjustable shelves and a subtle carved detail along the top edge, a pattern of interlocking geometric shapes that reminded me of the way our conversations wove together. "It's perfect," I said, running my hand along the smooth wood. "It's the most beautiful thing I own." "Good," Marcus said, though he was looking at me, not the bookshelf. "You deserve beautiful things." We loaded my books onto the shelves that afternoon, and it became clear pretty quickly that I had vastly overestimated how many books I owned. The bookshelf was maybe 60% full when we ran out. "So," Marcus said, standing back to assess the situation, "either you need to buy a lot more books or you didn't actually need a floor-to-ceiling bookshelf." "I needed a reason," I said. "The bookshelf was just the excuse." He pulled me close and I went willingly, resting my head against his chest, hearing the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "You never needed an excuse," he said into my hair. "I was hoping you'd walk through that door from the first time I saw you watching through the window." "You knew?" "Every morning for 2 months. Same time, same coffee cup, same longing look. I kept waiting for you to come in. Started planning what I'd say. Then one day you finally did, with that story about needing a bookshelf. And you looked so nervous I wanted to just kiss you right there and tell you I'd build you anything you wanted if it meant you'd keep coming back." I pulled back to look at him. "Why didn't you?" "Same reason you took 2 months to walk through the door. Fear, hope, the terror of wanting something real." We were together for 3 months before I introduced him to my parents. 3 months of learning the geography of each other's bodies, the landscape of each other's hearts. 3 months of waking up tangled together in his bed above the workshop, sunlight streaming through the skylights, the smell of wood and coffee and contentment. 3 months of becoming the version of myself I'd always wanted to be, the one who didn't hide, who didn't apologize, who loved openly and without shame. But my parents, that was different. That was the final wall, the last place I was still performing, still pretending to be their version of acceptable. "You don't have to," Marcus said when I mentioned it. We were in his workshop late on a Thursday night. He was finishing a commission, a dining table for a couple celebrating their 50th anniversary, and I was supposedly grading essays, but mostly just watching him work. I don't need their approval. I just need you. I know, I said, but I need to do this. For me, I need to stop living in two separate worlds. I need them to see me, really see me, and if they can't, if they won't, then at least I'll know. At least I'll have tried. He set down his plane and came over, kneeling in front of my chair, taking both my hands. Okay, but I'm going to be right there with you, and whatever happens, we're solid. You and me, that doesn't change. Promise? I asked, and I heard the child in my voice, the boy who'd spent years trying to be small enough, quiet enough, acceptable enough. Promise, he said, and kissed my knuckles. You're not alone anymore. The dinner was at my parents' house, the same suburban two-story where I'd grown up, where I'd hidden magazines under my mattress and practiced saying normal things in the mirror and learned to make myself invisible. My sister Sarah came too, a united front, though she pulled me aside when we arrived and whispered, "Mom's been weird all week, cleaning everything. Dad's been quiet. Just be prepared." Marcus held my hand as we walked up the driveway, and I didn't let go when my mom opened the door, didn't drop his hand or step away or pretend we were just friends. I held on and said, "Mom, Dad, this is Marcus, my boyfriend." The word felt revolutionary. Boyfriend, not friend, not roommate, not the careful euphemisms I'd used for years, just the simple, honest truth. My dad shook Marcus's hand. My mom hugged him briefly, mechanically. We sat down to dinner, and the conversation was stilted, painful, full of long silences and safe topics. Weather, traffic, Sarah's new job, anything but the obvious. Finally, over dessert, my mom set down her fork and said, "So how long have you two been, well, together?" 4 months, I said. Almost 5. "And you're serious? This is, what, a relationship?" "Yes, Mom, a relationship. I love him." I hadn't said it out loud before, not even to Marcus, but sitting there in my childhood home, I knew it was true. Had maybe known it since that first day in the workshop, or the first time he smiled at me, or the moment he picked up Giovanni's room and told me it made him feel seen. Marcus squeezed my hand under the table, and when I looked at him, his eyes were bright with emotion. My dad cleared his throat. "Your mother and I, we've been trying to understand. We've been reading, talking to our pastor, trying to figure out how to handle this." "Handle this?" I repeated, and I felt something crack open in my chest. "You mean handle me? Handle the fact that your son is gay, that he's been gay his whole life, that he's finally happy." "We want you to be happy," my mom said, but her voice was thin. We don't understand why you have to be so public about it, why you can't just keep it private, live your life quietly." "Because I'm tired of quiet," I said, and my voice was shaking but strong. "I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of pretending. I spent years making myself small for you, and I can't do it anymore. I won't do it anymore." "We're not asking you to hide," my dad said. "We're just saying there's no need to advertise, to make it your whole identity." Marcus spoke then, his voice calm and clear. "With respect, sir, you're wearing a wedding ring. You have photos of your wife all over this house. You introduced her as your wife within 30 seconds of us arriving. Your relationship is visible everywhere, and no one suggests you're making it your whole identity. You're just asking your son to hide what you get to celebrate, and that's not fair. That's not love." The silence that followed was deafening. My mom's face went pale, my dad's jaw tightened. Sarah looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. But I felt something shift inside me, something that had been locked tight for years suddenly opening, letting light in. "Marcus is right," I said. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm just asking to be seen, to bring the person I love to family dinners, to not have to edit my life story every time I talk to you. And if you can't do that, if you can't accept this, then I need to know, because I'm not going back into the closet, not for anyone. My mom started crying quietly. My dad stood up and left the room. Sarah reached across the table and took my other hand, squeezing hard. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "For the record, I'm so proud of you." We left shortly after. My parents walked us to the door with stiff goodbyes and promises to talk soon that felt hollow. In the car, I broke down, months of tension and fear and hope pouring out in ugly, gasping sobs. Marcus pulled over in a parking lot and held me while I cried, not saying anything, just being there, solid and warm and real. "I'm sorry," I finally managed. "I'm sorry that was so awful. I'm sorry they were so awful." "Don't apologize," he said, wiping tears from my face. "You were brave. You were honest. You stood up for us. That's not something to apologize for." "I told them I love you," I said. "I didn't mean to just blurt it out like that. I wanted it to be special, romantic, not in the middle of a fight with my parents." Marcus cupped my face in his hands, those Carpenter's hands that built beautiful things, and smiled. "You love me." "Yeah," I said. "I really do. I love you so much, it scares me." "I love you too," he said. "Have since that second visit to the workshop when you tried to use a hand plane and nearly took off your thumb and you laughed so hard you couldn't breathe. I love you, and we're going to be okay. Your parents, they might come around, they might not, but we're going to be okay." He was right. We were okay, more than okay. My parents did eventually come around, slowly, awkwardly, with the help of Sarah and some PF-lag meetings and time. It took almost a year, but they invited us to Thanksgiving. My dad shook Marcus's hand and asked about his work. My mom hugged me and whispered, "I'm trying. I'm really trying." It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Meanwhile, Marcus and I built a life together. I moved into the apartment above his workshop 6 months after that first dinner. We adopted a dog, a rescue mutt named Sawdust, who slept in piles of wood shavings and followed Marcus everywhere. I finished my novel and found an agent. Marcus got commissioned for a museum installation, the dream project he'd always wanted. And 1 year after he finished my bookshelf, on the anniversary of our first real conversation, Marcus took me down to his workshop late at night. The space was lit by a single lamp, casting long shadows across the workbenches and tools. "I want to show you something," he said, leading me to his main workbench, the one where he'd built my bookshelf, where I'd sat and watched him work through dozens of evenings. He got down on his knees and gestured for me to join him. Underneath the workbench, in the shadowed space where no one would think to look, he'd carved something into the wood. Our initials intertwined, surrounded by a simple heart. Below it, a date, the day I first walked into his shop. "I carved this the night after our first date," he said quietly. "When I knew I was falling in love with you. When I knew I wanted to build a life with you. I wanted to mark this space, this place where we began, with something permanent, something that would last." I traced the carving with my fingers, feeling the grooves he'd made, the permanence of it. "It's perfect," I whispered. "You told me once that your novel was about a man learning to build something permanent," Marcus said. "That's what I want to do, with you. I want to build something that lasts, a life, a home, a love that doesn't hide or apologize or shrink itself down." He pulled a small box from his pocket, and my heart stopped. I know we're young. I know it's only been a year, but I also know that I want to wake up next to you for the rest of my life. I want to build things with you, for you, alongside you, so will you marry me? I was crying again, but this time from joy, from the overwhelming rightness of this moment, this man, this life we were creating. "Yes," I said, God, yes, 1,000 times, yes. The ring was simple, a wood inlay in titanium, cherry wood from the same tree he'd used for my bookshelf. It fit perfectly, like it was always meant to be there. We got married 6 months later in the workshop, surrounded by sawdust and sunlight and everyone we loved. My parents came. My dad cried during the vows. My mom hugged Marcus afterward and called him son. Sarah was my best man and gave a speech about watching me become brave, about watching me choose love over fear. It wasn't a fairy tale. We had hard days, arguments about money and time and whose turn it was to walk sawdust. We had moments of doubt, of fear, of wondering if we were doing this right. But we also had mornings waking up tangled together, evenings cooking dinner while dancing in the kitchen, nights falling asleep to the sound of rain on the workshop skylights. We had each other. We had the life we'd built, piece by piece, joint by joint, with careful hands and open hearts. And underneath Marcus's workbench, hidden where only we knew to look, our initials remained carved in wood, a permanent reminder of the day I walked through his door and found the courage to stop hiding. The day I chose to be seen. The day I started building something that would last.